Didn't get a chance to check out the news this week or only caught up at a glimpse of the headlines before you raced out the door in the morning, our In the Know series has got you covered. First up, a shooting in Auckland has left 3 people dead and 6 people injured. Hours before the city opened up for the FIFA Women's World Cup, a shooting has left 3 people dead and 6 people injured at a construction site in the Auckland CBD. The gunman who also died in the event was a 24-year-old employee of the building who was home on detention for family violence offences. The motivation is believed to be drawn from indications of mental health history and links to his employment. It's currently being treated as an isolated incident with no security threat, though its timing just before the Women's World Cup ceremony did raise alarm bells internationally. Next up, the Victorian government pulls out of hosting the 2026 Commonwealth Games. In a shocking announcement by Victorian Premier Daniel Andrews, Victoria has officially axed its plans to host the 26 Commonwealth Games. Citing financial problems, the government said that the projected costs had inflated from the initial $2.6 billion to more than $6 billion. Now, this comes as the state has a growing debt burden, particularly due to the very long periods of lockdown during COVID. The call has been met with a lot of controversy publicly and politically, with many saying the state's reputation as a sporting capital has now taken a hit. The Commonwealth Games Federation is now scrambling for an alternative host or solution for the Games when it was already struggling before Victoria volunteered in April 22. Now, in news coming in from overseas, there has been a breakthrough in the unsolved killing of Tupac. Now, in 1996, of course, there was a fatal shooting of the prolific rapper, and it has been a source of mystery and conspiracy since it went unsolved. But in a new recent search warrant in Nevada, it hints that there might be a new discovery in the case. The Las Vegas police has said that the search warrant was executed at a home on Monday, local time, but it remains unclear what they were looking for. No arrests have been made yet, but the evidence in the case is now being presented to a Las Vegas grand jury. Nevada doesn't have a statute of limitations for prosecuting homicide cases, so if the trail stays warm, we could finally see answers for the tragedy. Now, it's some good news. After 3 months stuck at sea, an Aussie sailor and his dog have been rescued. That's right, Australian sailor Timothy Shaddock and his dog Bella have been found floating in the Pacific Ocean after being stranded at sea for months. A storm damaged his boat and wiped out the communication system just weeks after setting sail from Mexico in April. The pair were forced to survive on a diet of raw fish and seawater, but were thankfully rescued after a helicopter spotted them this week. Both are surprisingly happy and healthy, and Shaddock will be back on home soil soon. Major reforms for Indigenous students announced in the wake of school funding bias revelations. Now, there has been a mixed bag of news for Indigenous students this week, starting with new data emerging showing that there is a seismic gap in government funding to schools. So funding in private schools has increased almost twice as much as funding to public schools in the past decade. And of course, it's the remote schools with large Indigenous populations that are bearing the brunt of this gap. School funding in the Northern Territory, for instance, has dropped by almost 8% per student. These revelations have hit alongside new reforms announcing that all Indigenous students will be guaranteed a Commonwealth supported place at the university of their choice, regardless of location. This is an effort to try and boost the number of uni students from regional, poor and Indigenous backgrounds. Whilst this news is encouraging, the vast inequality happening on a high school level is yet to be effectively addressed. Now, here's a cute story. The world's biggest release of seahorses has happened in Sydney Harbour this week. In the hopes of boosting the population of the endangered white seahorse in Sydney Harbour, a record number of baby seahorses were released on Tuesday afternoon. About 380 of these little creatures were rehomed after being bred and reared in captivity. To help their survival, they've been released into swimming nets and artificial habitats called seahorse hotels. How cute is that? So far, the outcome has been a resounding success. It's a great win for the marine world and hopefully the start of replenishing the harbour's sea life. WTF story this week, because quite frankly, we'd be shafting you if we didn't tell you about this bizarre happening in Argentina. Yes, thousands of spoonworms appeared on a beach in the South American country this week after a heavy storm battered the region. Now, you might be thinking, okay, so what is so shocking about that? Well, while these worms have the scientific name of Unicinctus, they are commonly referred to as penis fish. And if you Google them, you will see why. Local fishermen have capitalised on the situation, flocking to the beach to gather up the worms, which they often use as bait, especially when fishing for sea bass. Despite their colloquial and very funny nickname, these creatures play an essential role in the marine ecosystem. They are also highly sought after in Asia, where they are believed to have medical properties. Google it, I dare you. It is hilarious. Well, we hope you guys are all now caught up to date with your news for this week. Our In the Know series is 100% built for parents, by parents, because we know how hard it is to get all of that news. And let's face it, who wants to trawl through depressing stories all week when you can have it delivered simply and sharply on a Friday afternoon?